I'm not paying another dime for ghost code. Either we own it or we gut it. That was Vanessa Griggs, our new COO, slamming her oat milk espresso on the conference table like she was Moses delivering commandments through a reusable Starbucks tumbler. She hadn't even been here 3 months, and already she was carving up what used to be our company like it was a stale pumpkin in a clearance bin. I watched her pace in front of the screen, red bottom heels, collagen smile, and a god complex that could power a mid-sized Tesla. Derek didn't flinch. He never did. He just sat in the corner of that glass fishbowl they call the legacy room, flipping through his ancient black notebook like he was deciphering a dead language. No laptop, no phone, just pen and paper, and the kind of quiet that makes executives twitch. She pointed at him mid-sentence. And that right there, that's what's wrong with this place. We're bleeding money trying to prop up dinosaurs like Derek who code like it's still Y2K. The interns chuckled. The CTO fake coughed a laugh. Even legal smiled. Derek didn't even look up. I did. Because while they were too busy high-fiving each other for gutting the soul of the company, I remembered the original pitch deck, the one Derek wrote in his garage with a whiteboard. 3 Red Bulls and a back end so clean you could run a hospital on it. By the way, if you're enjoying this story, pause for a second and hit that subscribe button and like the video. Seriously, it takes 2 seconds, but it tells us we should keep going. Only 3% of listeners actually subscribe, and the rest? Ghosts. Don't be a ghost. Smash that like. Now, back to the chaos. Zentrox used to be a scrappy dream. I was there at the tail end of the garage days, before the funding rounds, before the boardroom lighting and branded mugs. We built a platform from scratch that let enterprise clients automate their compliance workflows with a level of modular flexibility no one had seen. It was brilliant. It was stable. And every line of that code had Derek's DNA in it. But somewhere between Series B and a strategic brand refresh, we lost the thread. Derek got moved sideways. Technical advisor, which is Silicon Valley code for we don't know how to fire you without setting something on fire. The investors needed him on paper because of some licensing thing they never really understood. So they left him there, quiet, harmless, archived. Then Vanessa showed up. She came from a fintech giant where firing people was a metric. Her idea of innovation was breaking things fast, even if the thing wasn't broken. She rewrote our org chart in a weekend and started using phrases like brand synergy and data disruption velocity in meetings. By week 2, she was holding all-hands meetings in heels you could hear 3 rooms away. By week 3, she'd already erased Derek's name from our internal wiki, said it was confusing the new hires. He didn't push back. That's the thing about Derek. He didn't yell, didn't email legal, didn't demand a title correction. He just kept showing up, tapping his pen, watching the house he built slowly redecorated into a startup bro's dream loft. She kept hammering. Legacy code is a liability. If we don't rebuild the back end, we'll never scale. She wasn't wrong about that part, but she was wrong about everything else. Because while she was out there chasing Series D like it was Coachella, none of them realized what Derek had done all those years ago. None of them remembered the clause. Not legal, not the CTO, not even the board. But Derek did. And when I caught his eye that afternoon, after she called him sweetheart and told him we own his code, I saw it. Just a flicker. Not anger. Not even smugness. Just timing. The kind that says, let them talk, let them laugh, let them forget. Because the clock's already ticking. Vanessa called it a strategic cleanse. That's how she announced it on the Monday all hands, like we were overdue for a digital colonic. Half the company was cut by Friday. The rest of us? Reassigned, renamed, repackaged. Titles changed, departments merged, and entire teams dissolved like sugar in scalding tea. The old Slack channels vanished overnight. 10 years of knowledge nuked for efficiency. Derek's profile was quietly deleted from the org chart, like he was a glitch someone finally debugged. The funding deck she sent out to investors was slick, full of buzzwords and pastel graphics. Zentrox 2.0, a scalable future. I opened the PDF and nearly choked on my LaCroix. They'd scrubbed all traces of legacy attribution. No mention of original architecture, no footnotes for foundational IP. It was as if the codebase had willed itself into existence, just spontaneously spawned in a JIRA ticket the day she arrived. Then came the call. No invite, No warning, just a private calendar block labeled Infra Strategy Alignment with Vanessa's initials and a Zoom link. I saw Derek log in from a nondescript beige room that looked like it hadn't changed since 1999. Just white walls, a landline phone, and a bookshelf stacked with Java textbooks older than her hair extensions. Vanessa started like she was reading off a post-it. Derek, appreciate your time. We've reviewed your role and determined there's no current alignment with our roadmap. He just nodded, not even pretending to care. She tilted her head, real smug, and added, "You're not needed for investor calls or infrastructure reviews. Legal confirmed we've covered everything. We own your code, sweetheart. You can go." I swear I heard my own pulse in that silence. Derek blinked once. Understood. That was it. No rebuttal, no confusion. He didn't even unmute to ask a question, just clicked out like he was closing a browser tab that had been open too long. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, lips twitching with that faux compassion expression executives wear when they think they've just ended someone. But she hadn't ended anything. She'd activated something. That night, I stayed late finishing up a product timeline Vanessa demanded be ready for the investor pitch. I passed by Derek's office, door open, lights off, empty. But his chair was turned, just slightly, toward the filing cabinet in the corner, and that's when I realized he never took his desktop. Never wiped his drives, never touched the cabinets, because he didn't need to. Whatever mattered most to him, it wasn't here anymore. He'd already backed up everything that counted. The next morning, Vanessa strutted into the bullpen with a non-fat latte and a new mantra, forward only. She kept saying it like it was holy scripture, repeated it during syncs, scribbled it on whiteboards, stamped it on the new onboarding portal. But no one seemed to notice the way legal started whispering in side channels, or how the CTO suddenly scheduled a legacy refactor audit and looked like someone just handed him a live grenade. Vanessa thought she'd deleted a man. All she really did was set the expiration timer on her own control. And the moment she threw that line, "We own your code, sweetheart," was the moment Derek stopped being background noise and started being the trap they never saw coming. Derek's condo looks like a storage unit the world forgot. Half-unpacked boxes, wires like ivy crawling over bookshelves, and the kind of dust that says, "I've been busy keeping the lights on while everyone else was playing dress-up." I hadn't been there in years. Not since the first round of funding, when we still celebrated investor checks with pizza and too much whiskey. But when I showed up that night with 2 coffees and a bad feeling, he didn't say much, just nodded toward the desk and said, "They broke the license." I thought he meant metaphorically. You know, some VC bullshit about violating trust or erasing history. He meant literally. There was an old ThinkPad on his desk, thick as a dictionary, humming softly like a sleeping dog. He reached into a battered file box marked Founding Docs, pulled out a USB drive wrapped in electrical tape, and slotted it into the side like he was defibrillating the past. Took 30 seconds. Then the screen lit up, folder after folder labeled with names I hadn't heard in years. Onboard Packet Org, ZTX on Infra License V1, LTLLC agreements. No cloud backup, no Google Drive link. Just raw files with creation dates from the founding year and metadata so clean it might as well have been notarized by God. He opened one labeled Employment Terms D. Lawson signed .pdf and scrolled straight to Clause 12C. He didn't even need to search it. It read, "All software, architecture, code modules, and back-end infrastructure authored by Lawson Technical LLC for the purpose of supporting Zentrox Systems' core platform, hereafter ZTX platform, shall remain the sole intellectual property of Lawson Technical LLC. Zentrox Systems shall retain a renewable, non-exclusive license to use said IP, reviewed and reauthorized annually in writing, with lapse provisions triggered by 14 days of non-renewal." I felt my stomach drop through my spine. "They never re-signed?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He clicked open another file. This one, a time-stamped audit log he kept for personal insurance. It showed every license renewal since year 1, each signed by whatever exec we had at the time. And then, nothing. The last one dated back 14 months. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, voice calm. "Clock hit 0 2 weeks ago. No auto-renewal, no email, nothing in writing. They were too busy staging photo ops to read their own fine print." It didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in a room where the floor had already collapsed, and no one else had noticed the drop. Vanessa was out there printing t-shirts and pitching new features, and Derek was sitting on the one clause that could unravel the entire tech stack, brick by brick. He opened a command line interface and pulled up a list of API heartbeat checks, all of them pinging back through licensing keys that, according to the original agreement, belonged to Lawson Technical. Keys that were still live, still routing through DNS pathways only Derek had credentials for. If I pull this plug, he said, they lose dashboards in under 24 hours. Clients start asking why. SLA penalties hit in 48. By the weekend, they're either calling me or calling bankruptcy counsel. But he didn't pull it. He just bookmarked the console, stood up, and walked to the window like he was checking the weather. They never bothered to ask what the leash was made of, he said, barely audible. Then he turned, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not out of pride. But because the leash, it wasn't around his neck anymore. It was in his hand, and the door was already cracked open. Caldera Partners didn't walk into the deal starry-eyed like the last batch of VCs. They weren't here for the pitch deck aesthetics or Vanessa's rapid-fire jargon about market domination and infrastructure elasticity. They were lawyers in Patagonia vests with war stories baked into every question they asked. You could feel the tension in the room the minute they requested a full IP custody trail. Not a summary, not a pitch slide. The full thing, author logs, ownership documentation, licensing terms going back to the founding year. Vanessa smiled, of course. That strained kind of confidence only executives with zero clue and too much concealer could pull off. We own everything, she said, dismissing it with a flick of her wrist like it was an outdated meme. Our backend's proprietary, fully assigned, fully clean. The CTO nodded. Legal parroted her. No one looked deeper. No one asked Derek. Because as far as they were concerned, Derek was a paperweight, one they'd already mentally recycled. But Caldera wasn't stupid. I saw it in the side glances during the infrastructure walkthrough. The way their lead counsel, Jordan Pierce, tilted her head slightly every time we skimmed over legacy architecture. The questions they asked weren't about what we built now, they were about who built it first, and when, and under what terms. That same night, Derek called me. Just 2 words. It's time. He didn't message Caldera directly. He went through a third-party counsel he'd retained years ago, a woman named Marla Singh who once sued a Fortune 100 company into confessing API theft on live television. Marla drafted a 1-page disclosure. No threats, no accusations, just a statement of fact. Lawson Technical LLC retains IP ownership over the Zentrox core backend architecture. Licensing was issued on a renewable basis. Last renewal expired on date. Please refer to Clause 12C of the original employment agreement for verification. It was sent to Caldera's legal team through an encrypted channel. No CCs, no drama. By morning, Jordan had requested a private off-site meeting with Derek. No execs, no PR, no branding consultant spinning in a Herman Miller chair. Just facts. I didn't attend the meeting, but Derek called me after. Voice flat. No triumph. They asked one question, he said. Does the license still exist? I held my breath. What did you tell them? The truth, he replied. It expired. He didn't gloat, didn't even sound satisfied, because this wasn't revenge for him, it was clarity. They erased his name. He responded with a timestamp. They replaced his code attribution with buzzwords. He answered with a signature. This wasn't sabotage, it was correction, like tightening bolts on a bridge everyone forgot to inspect. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Vanessa was still strutting through meetings, showing off her vision boards and color-coded post-merger plans. She'd just greenlit a new logo refresh, something about digitally native warmth. But beneath the surface, cracks had started forming. Caldera's emails slowed. They stopped replying in real time. Then they started asking deeper questions, internal process questions, renewal procedure questions, ownership reassignment protocol questions. And legal? Legal started looking like they'd swallowed a USB stick sideways. But the best part? Vanessa still hadn't noticed. Because in her mind, she'd won. Derek was gone. The code was theirs. The funding was locked. She didn't realize the pitch deck she was still polishing had just turned radioactive, and the fuse was already burning, lit not with fury, but with precision. The room was quiet in that surgical, soundproof kind of way. No buzz, no echo, just the click of a pen against legal pad paper and the soft hum of filtered air trying too hard. Caldera had rented a private suite at the Markham Tower downtown, all glass corners and minimalist furniture that screamed discretion with a six-figure invoice. Derek sat at the head of the table, wearing the same black Henley he used to debug our entire server stack in 17. No suit, no laptop, just a folder, plain, manila, unbranded. Jordan Pierce, Caldera's lead counsel, was already seated when he walked in. Sharp suit, hair pulled back, eyes like twin microscopes. She didn't stand, didn't greet him with any fake warmth, just said, "I want to see the paper." Derek slid the folder across the table like it weighed nothing. But I knew what was in there. The original offer letter, the license agreement, the clause. Jordan opened it, skimmed, stopped, then read it again. She underlined it with a mechanical pencil, not highlighted, underlined, like a lawyer trying not to scream. All Zentrox platform code is licensed, not assigned. She closed the folder, looked up. "Mr. Lawson, is the license still active?" He didn't blink. "It expired 2 weeks ago." Silence stretched so long, I swear you could feel it settle on the furniture. Jordan leaned back in her chair like someone had just slipped her a grenade disguised as a sugar cube. She didn't speak for a moment, then she exhaled. "And they don't know?" Derek shook his head. "They never renewed, never read past the salary section." I could see the calculation flash across her face. Years of precedent, clause interpretation, the weight of investor risk. She picked up the folder again, this time slower, like it might bite. Flipped through the signature page, checked the timestamp, cross-referenced with the internal due diligence packet we'd submitted. The dates lined up perfectly, with no renewal, no email trail, no amendment, nothing. "They've been pitching code they don't legally own," she murmured. "No," Derek corrected. "They've been pitching access to code they were renting, access they let expire." Jordan nodded once, like a surgeon confirming the cancer's already metastasized. Then she stood. "We're done." She didn't mean the meeting, she meant the deal. She walked out. Folder in hand, no pleasantries, no need for more. The fuse had just burned through its final inch, and only she and Derek had heard the click. Back at headquarters, Vanessa was still preparing her big Investor Day reveal. She had a whole speech rehearsed about next-gen scaling and fully proprietary infrastructure built for speed. I'd seen the slides, fake commit dates, plagiarized architecture diagrams, and a glowing summary that implied she'd built the back end with her own 2 French manicured hands. She didn't know that in a downtown suite, a single folder had just torn that illusion in half. And Caldera? They weren't just pulling their investment. They were documenting the exact moment they found the rot. So when the fallout came, they could say, "We knew, and we walked." Derek didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just gathered his folder, nodded at the empty seat Jordan had left behind, and walked out with the same steady calm he'd had since the day they sidelined him. Because this wasn't vengeance. This was acknowledgement. And for a man they thought was obsolete, that one line, "It expired," was louder than any pitch Vanessa had ever given. The Caldera withdrawal hit like a ghost bomb. No press release, no farewell drinks, not even a courteous "thank you for your time." Just silence. One day the deal was imminent. The next, the data room was locked, the Slack guest accounts revoked, and Caldera's counsel went cold as limestone. Vanessa noticed the shift in energy around lunchtime on a Thursday. By 2 p.m., she was on her 5th espresso and yelling at a marketing associate for a typo in a press mock-up that was never going to print anyway. She tried to play it cool at first. "Some recalibration," she told the board. "Typical diligence turbulence." But the panic was dripping out of her pores like bad toner. Smiles too tight, meetings too long, questions too fast. And when she couldn't spin silence into confidence, she did what all paper generals do when the troops vanish. She blamed the interns, then the legal interns, then the junior staff, the onboarding assistant, and finally the entire legal ops team for failing to aggregate historical IPE artifacts. I watched it happen in real time, through the smoked glass of the executive conference room, her pacing like a caged influencer, waving her iPad as if sheer movement would reverse a legal expiration date. By Friday, the CTO, Simon, who once told me code was more of a vibe than a contract, was called into the war room, and that's when the Slack leak started. It began with a message he sent to legal at 11:04 a.m. "Hey, just checking. Do we have a clean assignment for Derek's original build-out, or is it still under that old LLC thing?" A minute later, Like, officially? Because the Caldera people are asking weird questions, then a quiet confession at 11:09 a.m., visible only in the thread but copied, screenshotted, and passed around like a sacred scroll. Crap. We never cleaned that up. I thought Vanessa's team did after Series C by noon. Clean that up had become an internal meme. Someone even made a Slack emoji out of it, a mop and fire. Morale was a bonfire. Engineers stopped attending stand-ups. The lead infrastructure dev muttered something about not wanting to touch ghostware that might get them sued. Meanwhile, I watched Derek from the courtyard bench. He wasn't in the building anymore. He'd taken his keycard off his lanyard and left it on the front desk like it was a borrowed coat. But every day around 11, he'd sit at the bench beneath the smoked glass lobby windows, sipping a gas station coffee, watching the panic ripple through the hive like a kicked ant nest. I sat down beside him. "They're trying to retroactive assign your code," I said. He nodded, slow. "They can try." "You gonna stop them?" He didn't answer right away, just took another sip. Then I gave them everything: structure, clarity, credit. All they had to do was honor the agreement. And now? He set the cup down on the bench beside him, leaned back, and looked up at the sky like it might drop answers. Now they get to learn the difference between ownership and access. Upstairs, I saw Vanessa storming past the windows with a phone pressed so hard to her face it looked like it might break skin. Someone from the board was following her. No one was smiling, and Derek just sat there, watching the fire through the glass, like a landlord who already served the eviction notice and knew the lights were scheduled to go out. They thought they could rebuild it in a sprint. That was the first mistake. Vanessa pulled a dozen engineers off client work and dumped them into what she dubbed Operation Phoenix, a desperate attempt to rise from the ashes of Derek's expired license. They started reverse engineering the back end, trying to untangle a decade of modular infrastructure like it was just another spaghetti bowl of deprecated Python. But what they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that Derek didn't just write code. He built an ecosystem, a breathing, humming, self-validating cathedral of logic. And at its core, heartbeat triggers, API calls, internal validation nodes that pinged Lawson Technical LLC every 72 hours like a digital lighthouse saying, "Still ours." Until they didn't. The first outage hit a Fortune 100 client Tuesday morning. Dashboard loading errors, missing compliance audit logs, timestamp discrepancies that made their legal team twitch. The client flagged it as category red and demanded escalation. Vanessa blamed the DevOps lead. The DevOps lead blamed the integration team. By noon, 3 more enterprise customers logged identical issues. Then the reports started stacking. User sessions expiring prematurely. Licensing module returned unknown authority. Backend pinged deprecated domain lawsontech.local. The CTO tried hot patching around it. That worked for 6 hours until the next API heartbeat was due and got met with silence. Because Derek wasn't responding. Because the calls no longer went anywhere. Lawson Technical, as far as the system was concerned, was a dead port. And without those calls, the platform shut itself down like a bunker sealed from the inside. Support queues exploded. Client success managers walked out of sync meetings pale and stammering. An engineer muttered, "It's like he booby-trapped the code with grace." They weren't wrong. This wasn't malware. No sabotage, no ransomware demands, just silence. The absence of permission. And in a system built on active licensing architecture, silence was rejection. On Wednesday, Derek received a formal letter on Zentrock's letterhead. I saw it. Clean white cardstock, gold foil logo. Inside 3 sentences drowning in corporate apology. "We regret the lapse in communication regarding the license agreement and wish to initiate immediate renegotiation. Your contributions remain critical to the continuity of our operations. We are prepared to offer a substantially revised licensing package, pending your availability to discuss terms." I watched him read it once, then set it down next to his coffee like it was an expired coupon. No reaction, no gloating, just that same calm stillness that always made Vanessa mistake him for obsolete. He tapped his finger against the corner of the envelope and said, "Funny, when I asked to clarify the license 3 years ago, they called it legacy noise." "They're listening now," I said. He nodded. "They always do, right after the system starts coughing blood." Zentrox spun up 3 separate task forces to recover the platform. None succeeded. One tried porting the code into a new container. It failed on authentication. Another tried creating a clone architecture. It failed on verification. The third just quit halfway through. Their summary report said, cannot proceed without reinitiating core trust chains licensed to Lawson Technical. It was the most elegant rejection I'd ever seen, not because it was aggressive, but because it was inevitable, like watching gravity reclaim a skyscraper that was never permitted to float. The board called it a strategic correction. I called it a white flag soaked in flop sweat. They summoned Derek to a closed-door session at 7 a.m. on a Sunday. No suits, no PR, just 5 men in loosened ties and one woman whose hands shook every time she reached for her lukewarm conference coffee. Vanessa wasn't there. Yet. But her fate was already sealed in the silence that followed Derek's entrance. He didn't sit at the table. He placed his laptop on a side credenza, clicked it open, and said just 4 words. I'm here to license. They waited, expecting a pitch, a demand, a performance. But Derek wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to finalize terms he'd already written. He slid a 2-page agreement across the table, bullet-pointed, time-stamped, and pre-signed. Licensing fee will triple retroactively to cover operational downtime. Lawson Technical LLC retains full IP ownership in perpetuity. All core documentation and platform materials will list Derek Lawson as founder and principal architect. Vanessa Griggs is to be removed from all Zentrox leadership and advisory roles, effective immediately. Upon execution of agreement, platform will be restored via reissued key within 60 seconds. No flourish, no speech, just a clean list and a quiet stare. One of the board members, a guy who once called Derek our in-house Gandalf, cleared his throat and said, "We'd hoped for a more collaborative resolution." Derek shrugged. "You had one. You deleted it from the org chart." The room went still. Another member, older, former military by the posture, read the document silently, then tapped the final line. "Clause 5, he muttered. "You serious about the 60 seconds? Derek just nodded. "To the millisecond, assuming your Wi-Fi isn't garbage." There was no vote, just glances, slight nods, and the defeated sigh of a man in charge of quarterly investor relations who realized he'd be spending the next week writing apologies instead of bonuses. They signed. Vanessa arrived 5 minutes later, already mid-rant about optics and brand dilution. She made it as far as the doorway before security intercepted her, gently, quietly, with rehearsed efficiency. I'll never forget her face when she saw Derek standing there, still by the credenza, still calm. "You don't get to do this," she snapped, face flushed. He didn't even look at her. Just turned the laptop screen toward the board and typed a single command, authkey.push, envprod. Token LTX resoir renew, 2025 one line. Hit enter. The screen flashed green, heartbeat re-established. 60 seconds later, Zentrox's backend was live. Dashboards loaded, APs purred like tuned engines. Clients refreshed and exhaled. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment. The CTO stared at the screen, mouth slightly open, as if he expected fire or a ransom note. Instead, he saw code lines reinitializing trust chains and unlocking services they'd nearly bankrupted trying to fake. Vanessa was already gone. The board thanked Derek, offered him a permanent seat, stock, a title. He declined them all. "I'll give you a year," he said. "No more. After that, it's your house again." They nodded. He closed the laptop. Outside, I caught up with him near the elevator. "You could have stayed. You could have taken it all." He shook his head. "I don't want the house. Just wanted my name back on the blueprint." Then he stepped inside the elevator, hands in his jacket, eyes already somewhere else. Dignity doesn't need volume, and leverage, it never screams. It just walks out quiet after cleaning up the mess. The office was quiet, intentionally so. Caldera didn't do loud. Their HQ was glass, wood, and silence. Everything expensive but understated, like the kind of place where fortunes are moved in whispers, not bells. Derek sat at the long walnut table, facing a single folder, leather-bound and embossed with the Caldera crest. No laptops, no distractions, just paper, ink, and a single gold pen placed with surgical precision. Jordan Pierce was already there. No small talk, no pleasantries. She nodded once, tapped the folder, and said, "You ready?" He opened it slowly, read every line even though he already knew the terms. The title, Chief Technology Officer, Caldera Partners Systems. The clause, full build autonomy. Lawson Technical IP remains independently owned and exclusively licensed to Caldera-aligned entities. You get to build what you want, when you want, Jordan said. No boards, no handcuffs, no suits pretending to know what a commit log is. And Zentrox? Derek asked, almost absently. They'll be leasing, she said. From us. He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Just enough to count. He signed. Meanwhile, 17 floors below, Vanessa sat alone in what used to be her personal glass palace, a conference room rebranded for silent transition. No one made eye contact with her anymore. No one briefed her. Her badge still worked, but it beeped like a countdown. The screen in front of her blinked to life. A Caldera press announcement rolled across the ticker. Zentrox platform now powered under exclusive license by Lawson Technical, a Caldera partner company. Beneath it, a video message autoplayed. Derek, seated, confident, calm. Legacy isn't old, he said. It's ownership. Vanessa didn't blink, just watched as her reflection ghosted across the screen, fading beneath the Lawson Technical logo, now bigger than the one she'd once commissioned for 6 figures. She reached for her phone. No new messages. The silence was its own verdict. Because this wasn't Derek's revenge. This was restoration, of authorship, of credit, of control. Outside, Derek stepped onto the rooftop garden, folder in hand. The skyline stretched wide and gold in the late afternoon haze. A new product build spun up on a secure server somewhere in the distance, humming with possibility. He didn't look back, didn't need to. They'd erased him. He rewrote the terms. They called it theirs. They should have read the fine print.